So we'll call the meeting to order at 4:59, and I have minutes I drafted. I don't know if you've looked at them at all since we last met.
I did.
Had our subcommittee goals outlined. So any changes to that?
No, they look fine.
I'd like to amend the agenda to add under old business 3B exit interview questions,
Okay.
as you forwarded that to us, so that's just an agenda item here. So all in favor of the minutes? Aye.
Aye.
Okay. Old business, superintendent's evaluation. I printed out 2 copies of Tom's notes on the evaluation. I wasn't sure if you had a chance to look at that yet.
I did go through it, yes.
So, do you want an extra copy, or,
No, I did it right here.
okay?
Just gotta find it.
I saw your name in there, Jamie, today. I almost sent you a message.
And the.
When you're in the Google Doc,
Oh,
the person
okay,
who creates it
yeah.
can see, well, everyone can see who's in there at what time.
All right,
It's kind of fun. Pam, I did love the idea of adding student safety. I thought that
because
was
it's a hot
great.
topic.
Yeah,
I
but
don't
it's
know if you
also,
wanna have pupil safety.
no, I offered one suggestion. One suggestion on page 8. I just thought that it should be,
You
by,
took out you put task force in.
yes, it's the
That's fine, that
superintendent
was fine.
safety task force,
It
and
looks fine.
I said working collaboratively with
Yeah,
them.
sure, that's fine.
Okay.
That was great.
And,
So about when it comes to the criteria, the written criteria, as we know, the policy for evaluation and goal setting indicates with legal references. Under Ed Code 303.01, Part K, substantive duties of school boards, Section K, annually evaluate the superintendent based on written criteria. So I wasn't sure what written criteria meant, and the only written criteria we form annually is our goals for the board. So I stuck those into the draft, thinking we should pay attention to our past goals.
yep,
But you had your own 2 written goals, so,
well, I think it was a
It's
great idea.
ambiguous.
I do think, I just wanted to be clear that I thought it was a great idea to incorporate a component of the goals for the board
and you
in
did
my
that.
evaluation.
And you stuck those
Yeah.
down at the bottom, which is great.
Yep, the written criteria is the job description,
Right,
right? But the goals, I did, if you look at page 8, you added domain H, completion of annual board goals. We could say,
yeah,
we could just call it board goals if you wanted to, because the board goals are the board's. That doesn't mean that my goals won't be set in relationship to that, right? They are.
yes, right.
But it's important to just kind of maintain a separation that the board needs to evaluate themselves on their own goals.
I understand.
And so what I suggested was assist the school board in meeting annual goals while
That's fine.
performing executive
Yes, it's
functions.
fine. Yeah.
And then I added a couple, actually.
And you duplicated this, I just took that one.
Oh, did I duplicate that? I'm sorry.
That's okay. You
So-
got 6, so we forgive that.
Communicates, I added communicates with the community in a variety of ways.
So that is already on page 8,
Oh, I
under
missed it. Okay.
community involvement, actively disseminates information and encourages exchange of ideas, under topic 2.
Oh, so we can take that
I
out.
think that one can be taken out, so
Okay.
I kind of took that one out.
Okay.
And then for the last one, instead of superintendent met goals, I put meets professional goals agreed upon,
Perfect.
because you had professional goals above.
Mhm.
We could change that domain H to completion of annual goals and take out the word board, since you're including yours and ours.
I think that's good.
All right, so
Yeah.
we don't wanna have the title misrepresent. Does that sound good to you?
Yeah, I don't have any problems with it.
That's a pretty complete
Problems with that.
evaluation. I think it looks great. So what I'll do is, I'll just bring this to the next board meeting.
This is an area of growth for the state of New Hampshire, and other superintendents have been asking me.
Evaluations.
Yeah, there've been a lot of problems with superintendent evaluations in the past, where boards didn't complete them and then there was an issue, and they didn't have anything to look back at, or
Right.
it's.
When you say area of growth, just more people are doing it?
Yeah,
now?
it's,
Okay.
I guess what I'm saying is that it's not implemented consistently enough across districts, and it really is, it's important on two levels, because when I write this and work with you on this, I'm not just thinking about me, because I look at this regularly and think, am I doing the things that I'm being evaluated on, right? And I look at
You
your,
are above and beyond.
thanks, but I have your goals too on my desk. You know, I think, okay, what are the
Oh,
school board
right,
goals?
yeah.
Like today, I was reaching out to people about the seminary, because I kind of lost touch about the seminary for a little while when I was
It's
sick.
already for Halloween, right?
Not yet.
Okay.
But I will say that.
That's still on the docket, by the way, quick segue.
That is on the docket, but I'll talk about that later, but it's one option,
Right.
right?
But
But not for this year, but at least we have a few fish in the pond that we're working toward catching. But what I would say is that I was also thinking that I wanted this written so that it could be used with someone else. Right, so I'm thinking about your future, not that I'm
What are
going
you saying
anywhere.
here?
Yeah.
No, nothing, no, seriously, I'm fine. I'm just saying that in the future, someday, you wanna have an
The degree
evaluation
will
tool.
happen, okay, I'm just telling you that, you can get it done, I'm just like, I'm worried that you're gonna like, oh, I'm going to college now, bye.
No, not that at all, but I'm just thinking about, you know, you want an objective
No,
document
it's,
that,
it's fine.
I love what's in here, it's really accurate, right?
Right.
And one area of growth that I thought was important to reflect on this year when we talk about this is, I've really worked hard to get data in front of people. So if you notice, like at the public hearing last year, I put it right out there. That's never been done before, and that was an area that I identified that I didn't feel I did
You
do as much of
really
the first year.
provided, a substantive basis for requesting literacy funds, for example. I mean, we can't just say, we need to improve, we need to show why we need the money, and you had that data there, so that was really great.
Thank you.
then there's, not to discourage it, because you have to do it, you have to put yourself out there, but you take the beating for it too, because.
You have to be
Okay.
tough.
And you were very
People-
honest about vaping, for example, which, now you hear about it all the time in the news. It's just a
Right.
huge crisis and there's no clear solution. And you were very transparent about that, which was really helpful.
Thank you.
And
Well,
when there's an issue, you don't try to sugarcoat, and that's really great.
Good, thanks.
So-
Well, I really like the way this came out, and I think that it was really good to talk about the school board goals and the relationship, because that relationship should be clear, right? That I do support your goals, but like, for example, the board set a goal of putting the seminary property on the ballot, hopefully having something to put on the ballot.
Yeah.
I might not be able to meet that,
No.
right? That's hard,
Yeah.
but it's good to work toward.
So are you thinking about goals for this coming year that you'd like to separate out from your usual duties? I guess that's
Yeah.
something we'll talk about later, but
Yeah,
I mean, we did give you a bonus for specific timeline being met, which was really great, but, I mean, if you have no specific goals you have in mind, you have enough to do anyway, so it's not like,
Yeah,
oh boy, I can't think of anything I need to
We
do.
could think up something.
I know.
Yeah, I'm sure you could, but I have a couple that I'm thinking that really, I
Well,
wanted
that's
to.
aside, I just wanted to mention that, I guess we're
Oh,
gonna have to
okay.
set new specific goals for
Yeah,
you.
yeah. The reorganization is gonna cover most of that, I think.
Right, so that's
So.
done. Now, exit interview questions, I did print out the draft.
Yep.
You guys should vote to accept the revision.
Oh, so move to approve forwarding the revision, the revised evaluation to the board for its approval.
Second.
All right, all in favor?
We don't need to vote, Diana, but you can if you want to.
I can, I'll just raise.
So do you guys mind if I go back to the teachers and parents? Or do you want me to stay for a specific component of this?
No,
I
but
just-
I will
I-
just hand this off to you quietly without saying anything, just so you know my thoughts. So I just wanted to give that to you tonight.
Okay, I'll take a look at it.
All right.
What writing is yours versus theirs?
This is all, that's all theirs. Anything changes.
Did you put that in the survey?
These are my concerns.
All right, I got it. It's good for me to read it.
I filled out the survey.
Did you put it in the survey too?
Most of it, but it's kind of, I tried to make it easier to read.
Okay, can you send this to Patty? She's leading this work. I'll take a picture of it and text it to
I'm
her.
such an outlier, I just want you to.
I can send it to both, because I filled
diplomat,
out the survey, but I saved all my responses, so I mean, I'll be glad to forward
right?
it.
I just want you
She'll
to,
put it in the survey, but if she had things that she didn't put in the survey, I wanted her to make sure Patty gets it.
Okay,
You can break it to her easily, I'm not very
All right.
diplomatic.
Well, I'm gonna go visit with parents, because it's a nice time to see the community, and then I'll see you guys at
All right.
6:30.
Yeah, we'll trash you while you're gone.
That's
Oh,
fine.
oh, oh.
Yeah.
6 or 6, I thought it was 6 o'clock, yeah.
There's a
It's at
video
6:30.
rolling
It's
here.
at 6:30?
Yeah, and it'll be done by 7:30.
Well, that's fine.
And we have a seat for you out front, and there's some food down the hall too.
Yeah, heard that.
All
right.
Thanks.
All right, guys, I'll see you in a few
So,
minutes.
second item is exit interview questions, and
I have not given up on giving
Can I hand
the
this
official
over?
commercial ones.
Here's
Right
another
now, I
one.
have not been able to get the person I was trying to get it from, so I brought it to the director of HR and asked her,
Okay.
asked the person that I was getting.
all right.
And I put some together as well.
Oh,
So I reached out to some schools,
Okay,
and this is just a compilation of, the feedback that I received. So just something to look at.
oh, so this one, is this the one that was in the attachment?
Yes.
Yeah, so there's one item I noticed where it doesn't say Sanborn, it says your source.
Oh, okay, I missed that.
Yeah, so that is on page 2 at the very bottom. In the title above the matrix, on the right-hand side, last word. Provided by, I think that's supposed to say Sanborn. Do you see it?
No, where is it?
Here, I'll point it to you. Right here.
Oh, that's Pinkerton.
Yeah.
So you can, I told you, I got it, I reached out.
what page is that?
It's right, your finger's on it, right here. We should see
Oh,
Sanborn.
so, yeah.
Right.
Just I assume when you adjusted it, you
Yeah, we
just
don't
missed
need
that
to-
because your eyes
I
were looking at
missed
it
it.
too much, yeah.
Yeah.
There's an awful lot of congruence between the two.
Right, yeah.
Yeah.
Just a matter of how you frame it, and
Mhm.
certainly this is a much more professional document than my chicken writing.
And
I had opportunity for advancement as an addition to Jamie's list.
Yep, that's a good one.
That's great, yeah. So, go ahead, Storm.
no, from what I could gather from the other schools, they primarily send out a form. or a
Good
Google
evening,
Doc.
everybody, and welcome to Meet the Teacher Night. This is a 5-minute warning. In 5 minutes, 9th grade will be doing a presentation in the auditorium. 10th grade will be doing a presentation in the library. Thank you.
So they send out a form, or it's in the form of a Google Doc. And I think that's great, and I think we should start that way, but I also think that I should personally, because this is what I started to do towards the end of last year, reach out to anyone who's leaving and just have a verbal conversation with them, even if it's over the phone. Face-to-face
Yeah.
though is great, because
We
you
require,
Yeah.
I guess you can't prevent somebody, but it is kind of, we say from a business perspective, it's required to do an exit. You can
Right.
get in there and say, I'm not talking to you,
Mhm.
but you are scheduled on your last day, and you need to pick up things from HR
As
on
part
your
of your
last
work
day
day, yeah.
to come in
Right.
for the exit interview. And generally speaking, and I noted this here on this, has to be confidential. If they think you're going to take that information and that very day or the next day tell everybody what so-and-so said, you'll never get anything.
Right,
They have to understand that the data will be kept confidential, but will be aggregated to provide trends or themes to administration. But we wouldn't want to be in the position of saying, Jane Doe said this about so-and-so. I mean, you never, well, obviously you know that, you never want to be there, but it's important that the people being exit interviewed know that this isn't just going to be
right.
talked about, that they said these things on their way out the door.
Right, and we're in a little funny situation because unlike a business, our teachers are off during the summer. So if we have movement during the summer, at least I'll talk over the telephone. Talking in person sometimes, if they live out in the Manchester area, they're not going to drive all the way here to talk to me.
Right.
But for the most part, they are very willing to come in and talk.
And talking's important because
It
a
is.
lot of people will say, I'm simply not putting that in writing. But I'll tell you because somebody needs to know. But they
Exactly.
won't put it in writing.
Exactly. So I like the idea of a form, but I would like to use the form really as a last resort. And really draw someone in to have a conversation with me. Based on these questions, though, I can
Right.
certainly ask whatever questions we come up with and agree on, but my preference would be to have a face-to-face conversation, and so far, that hasn't been an issue really for anyone, so.
Have you found people to be more than open on the negatives? A lot of people, with the old adage of don't burn bridges, will say a lot of nice platitudes that they don't mean one bit. Other people will just rant nonstop, but generally speaking, if it's a face-to-face or a discussion, you can elicit from them what the true concerns are.
And that's what I find, and I get more of the negatives, than I really thought I would. So that's why I like face-to-face, so.
I believe it's more effective, I agree with you.
It is, so, and it's not an issue to, and I will go to someone too. So if they don't or can't come to now the new office, I have no problem going to their school and chatting with them at their school. At the end of the year, it's pretty busy, and there are a lot of people at one time who might be leaving. So it's easier for me sometimes to go to the schools and meet at the schools, so.
And exits, just to give you some frame of reference, how many people that leave the district are doing so at the end of the year versus doing so mid-year?
The majority are the end of the
By the end of the
year.
year?
Mhm.
That makes
I think
sense.
we might have had, as far as professional staff, teachers, 4 who left. 3 or 4 who left in the middle of the summer, so not a lot. But still, some, and actually, 2 of them came in, and talked to me face to face, so.
Any recurring themes from the different discussions that you've had that just seem
You
to
know
keep on
what?
popping up?
The one thing that really surprised me was the redistricting. And the fact that they thought their jobs were not secure, and that surprised me, because I didn't feel that that was the message that was being portrayed. So that surprised me. You know, some are the standard, it's closer to home, the pay is a little
Right, or
higher.
moving out of the area.
Moving out of
or-
the area, but
Right.
there were several who brought up the redistricting, and they were very open and honest about the fact that they were afraid they were
Down
not
the
going to
road,
have a
yeah.
job.
Though the superintendent was pretty clear about the number of people he expected
Right,
to have let go if they retire and not fill.
right.
And he had a specific number, I believe it
Yeah.
was 2, no more than 2, and he's pretty good about estimating their staffing needs, but still, people were concerned, I guess.
Right,
Yeah.
that surprised me.
I'm not overly surprised. You get change is threatening.
It
Some
is.
people embrace it and say, you know, I like this because they just like living on the edge, for lack of a better phrase.
Right,
But a lot of people, they like
Risk-averse.
I mean, we're all creatures of habit. You pull in,
Right.
if the spot's open, you park in the same spot every day. If you
Right.
come into a meeting like this and it's always us 4, we would tend to come back to these seats.
right,
Just because we're creatures of habit. So when a change like this is disrupting the habit, and it's not a comfortable position for a lot of people, and they're looking for something that
right.
doesn't change as much.
Unfortunately, every district is going through changes, so.
That's true.
Right.
It's hard to escape.
I think it was more the job security. So, it did surprise me.
But yeah, Superintendent Blake also reported to us on the reasons for departures, and
Yep.
it was a huge variety, it wasn't any one.
Yeah, I mean, it'd be interesting to see the
Right.
Pareto on that, you know,
Yeah.
how many,
Oh,
had
yeah.
which reasons.
Mhm.
Or some would have multiple reasons, I presume.
I can't keep up. I'm trying to type
Oh,
away.
you're way too detailed for most,
I'm just trying to type away in
Minutes.
case that doesn't record it.
okay. Well, gee, you're very thorough. So we do need to add confidential information at the very top of the document.
Yeah, if
Under
people think
questionnaire.
that you're going to talk to old to their former colleagues about
Right.
comments that they made, they simply won't talk to you because they're not, most people aren't interested in sticking the knife in as they walk out the door. There's just no, there's no benefit to that to them.
Right.
They'd be
Right.
reluctant to open up if they thought that was part of the agenda.
Okay.
I mean, truly, the agenda from a district and a school board position is the agenda is to get an assessment from somebody that's got a unique position, an insider that's decided not to stay inside.
Mm-hmm.
And you can get some interesting data sets that you can't otherwise get. That's a unique pool of people.
Mhm.
So we want to get what we can from them to help us.
We had a couple leave who hope to return at some point.
Well, that's one of my questions is, would you come back?
Mm-hmm.
Because sometimes it's just it's got nothing to do with you guys. I got some outside life things I gotta take care of, and
Right.
if I could get a chance to come back, I would, but right now I'm dealing with some of my stuff.
Or we had someone who was a PE teacher, left to become an athletic director, would hope to be able to come back here someday as an athletic
sure.
director. So that type as well.
And it's important to have that. And if, for example, you had just to make up a theoretical, if you had a steady stream and a theme going on saying the discipline in the school is hard and I'm not putting up with it anymore, well, that's good information to know, because
Right.
there's probably a lot of others that haven't left that have the same concern, and it's a real concern that needs to be addressed.
Right, and
And you might not get that otherwise.
Right, and I haven't seen that really. It was really redistricting, money, closer to home, moving, the family was
Yeah.
moving. That's primarily what I got for information. So it wasn't anything eye-opening, like, oh my goodness, this is news to me that you're telling me this is happening in your school.
I would have expected all four of those would come up. Not to which one being the highest, I
Right.
don't know, but I would have expected those to
Right.
be some of the reasons.
I want to throw in a question. So if we're going to compile this data, how often do you want this data to be reported? Because you don't want to have it reported out after
You
each
can't.
termination.
You can't keep the confidentiality unless you aggregate it.
Right,
Right.
so is it on an annual basis?
If most of your exits are at the end of the year,
Right.
then it'd be good to accumulate that, at the beginning of the year to assess for the coming year, is there anything that is weighty enough to have us incorporate that in a goal in the coming year? We've really got to address this. This is something unexpected or something different or something's changed or what
So
have you.
let's-
But you can't do it all that frequently, because
Right.
then it becomes too easy to isolate who said what.
Right.
You don't want to do that.
Right, so let's do that. Why don't I'll keep a formal list, and then come this time next year, I can write up a synopsis of my findings and we can look at it.
So I'd like to add one more under, how do you feel your direct supervisor handled the following? It may be covered elsewhere, but this might be helpful. Assigned work duties were well-defined and in line with my expectations. I'm not sure where that could go, but you know how sometimes you get into a job and then you're up till 3 grading and you're assigned to leadership roles and you're not getting compensated, you know what I'm saying? When you take a job, you're not expecting to do more than teach and focus on your students, but sometimes you're on 10 committees and so forth. Don't ask me how I know that, but it happens at school sometimes.
Right.
So, I'm just something along those lines. Work duties were well-defined and in line with my expectations. And then usually, almost always, so forth. Is that okay as an addition?
Yes.
Because you know how there's some kind of job drift, you see happening sometimes? They always go to you to do something new and you're swamped, so. Not good.
One of the other items that I had was culture, because everybody defines culture differently. So you might elicit statements on culture that somehow you didn't unravel with all these other direct questions, because people put whatever they want into
Right.
into culture.
Right. Okay,
You know, there's people were bullies to me, or it's a very camaraderie relationship. It's kind of hard to
right,
grab that otherwise.
right.
That could come under part 10. Any comments on the district's culture or suggestions to make Sanborn a better place to work?
Yeah, I mean, what I'd do is I'd take mine, cross-reference it in,
Mm-hmm,
think of it, it's covered, and then leave the duplications out.
mm-hmm.
If you have some others, and then maybe we get one markup, and then we can review that at the next meeting and say, this looks good, and then we use that as our boilerplate going forward.
Okay.
Well, I just gave you my main addition. Let's see.
I think most of mine is, I didn't mark each one of them, but I went through it, most of mine are in this
Mm-hmm.
form in one way or another.
And I can take a look and combine the two.
Yeah, I mean, if you can do that, that'd be fine, because
I'll do
I think most of them are in there.
Mm-hmm, okay, I'll do that.
We might use different words, but
Mm-hmm,
it's pretty much asking the same thing. And then if I do if the director of HR gives me the official one that we use, it's just at least another
yes,
boilerplate that might end up giving different questions than you otherwise get from just the insular, well, this is how schools have been doing it. Well, is there any other item that comes up that we didn't think about from our normal school perspective?
mm-hmm,
So
great.
if I can get that, I'll forward that along. And I forwarded this to the director of HR too, saying, here's what I've come up with so far, but I'm sure you've got a more official looking policy. Could you get that sent to me, please?
All right, so I'll take
Yes,
care of that.
The only other change I would make maybe would be, this is the only other one, under how do you feel administration handled the following? You might want to add provided student support services as needed
Okay.
or as requested, because we have a great student support department here with Jody,
Mhm.
and hopefully that's going well. So if a student has a problem, behavioral problem, whatever, and they've reached out to the administration, where the needs match,
Okay, good.
those arose, so that's about all I have.
Okay, good.
Looks great though, wow, thank you so much. So I'm working off of this one now, and I just added anything I
Yeah.
wanted to hers.
That's what I did.
And so I think we should maybe look at the finished draft at our next meeting,
Mhm.
and then we'll hand it off to the board after that.
Yeah, That's
So
fair.
you might think of something else later, and
Right,
then we'll sort of develop the final draft.
good.
Thank you so much. So, new business, travel reimbursement policy.
Yes.
I'm out of my depth here, okay? This is something that,
Let me-
there's so many details, and I think Matt and Jamie are the experts on this.
Mhm.
And also, there are legal issues here, because if someone uses their own credit card and they're waiting for reimbursement, how long before they get upset about they get their reimbursement, so,
Here's my experience of 35 years in the workforce, and the differences between what we do and what we allow, and what is normal financial control business practices in business with. One is we require documentation to demonstrate proof of cost. Here, not so much. So we require a submittal, but for example, I've asked to see some of them, and I'll see a calendar with numbers on it, of miles. And some of those numbers of miles were driven 12 months ago. From a financial control perspective, there's no ability of anybody that's monitoring or controlling, a controller, the expenses, there's no way for that person to know whether those are valid or not. In the financial controlling world, what you do is, you put checks and balances in for two reasons. One is you assume everybody is honorable and rightful and they're gonna do the right thing. And two is you assume that nobody is. So you build checks and balances in for two purposes. One, to ensure that you have proper control over the financials. And one is a disincentive for anybody that might otherwise be tempted. Oh, well, I'm not gonna do that because I know I'm not gonna be able to submit that. They really don't let me buy a bottle of Dom Perignon when we're taking the softball team. So I'm not gonna try to do that because I know the rules are such that I have to turn in a receipt and the receipt's gonna say Dom Perignon and they're gonna say that's, you know, sorry. Nice of you to donate that, but that's not a covered expense. And so one of the things that is very required in the business world is timely submission of expense books. So we have, when I go through the manifest, and I've asked Matt some of this information, we have expense books that are covering 12 months. Well, if I am turning in my expense books weekly, then if I said that I was out of the building for 2 hours a day during the week, there's numerous people that have contemporary knowledge as to whether I was in the building or not. If I turn that in 12 months later, nobody has any idea. So let's assume that it's all 100% completely legitimate. It's a disservice to the person waiting for the 12 months because their integrity could then be challenged when there's absolutely no reason to challenge said integrity, simply because, geez, what are all these things doing from 12 months ago? So it's not good for them, and it's not good for the district to not have the proper financial controls in place. So when we talked in meetings, and this comes up in the finance meeting when I review the manifest, because I say I want to see the details to this, and then I get the details out, and I start trying to flip through, and I'll say to Matt, I got this 192 miles here. Where? Where did we go? I have, for example, without getting into overly specifics, I've got areas over $1,000 of expenses. And most of what I see on those is mileage numbers. So being a financial controller, one of the things that you do when you're an auditor and financial controller is you test receipts and financial records, and you test them for reasonableness. And you say, okay, I've got schools that are in a radius of, pick the number that you're most currently with, 8 miles, 5 miles. How did I accumulate at 58 cents a mile, $1,000 worth of travel? That would be 12 to 1,300 miles. Geez, this is something I should look for greater information on because it triggers itself when you do a financial audit. So how do you do financial audit? So these are the things that you look for. And then some of the things I find is, had those expense books that we are paying been turned in my company, the person would be paying for these out of their own pocket because the documentation records aren't there. It's just not sufficient financial records to pass an audit. Now, that said, in my company, somebody's expense book is not going to be deemed to be material enough to have misstated the financial records of the company. But that's not the only reason you're doing audits. Part of the audits is, if you don't have controls on the small things, then I'm very concerned that you also don't have controls on the big things, and the big things are the ones that can lead to a misstated financial statement. So it's just an area that we need a better policy so that the employees know what the expectation is. I'm sure the employees that are filling this out are thinking along the lines of, this is a pain in the butt to fill this thing out, and if I'm gonna go through this difficulty.
Sorry.
If I'm going to go through this.
You can complain to Tom.
Yeah. If I'm going to go through this difficulty, I'm gonna only do it once a year. And I'll keep my records, and I don't even remember what they were, but I know I wrote it down in that book, and I only write it down in that book on my calendar. If it's real, I know it was, I just don't know the details behind it. But I'm only gonna do it once a year because it's a pain in the neck. They have no expectation that that is in any way, shape, or form not okay. And and to me, being in finance, I've been a finance manager, I've been a financial analyst, I've been a controller. That's not an okay way to do travel expenses. It really should be timely, like if you have something to put in, if you are traveling between the schools on a weekly basis, end of day Friday, you should be saying, you know what, this is what I do for, it takes me 15 minutes, the end of day Friday, I put that in, I fill it out, I send it in. It's part of my routine. If you're not, you're only doing it occasionally, you're only traveling occasionally, then you send it in occasionally. One of the ways that we control that, I don't know if we do this here, is we issue the corporate credit cards to individuals' names. And if it's not paid in time, it goes against the individual's credit record, which shows up in their credit score for expenses that they're incurring on behalf of the company. Now, the trick to that, to your point, is the company now has to make bloody well sure that they're processing these in time, so they're not impacting their employees' credit scores.
But there's an incentive.
There's an incentive for everybody to be current.
Yeah. We do issue credit cards in people's names, however, it doesn't impact their credit score. The issue is we get money back from the credit card company for our purchases. So we try to use the credit cards as much as possible.
Yep.
However, every single purchase has to be approved by myself before it can go on the credit card. So that's how we control the credit cards.
The credit cards, most of what at least what I've seen so far, and I've got some more data sets coming in, but most of what I've seen so far have been mileage related. And so I'll give you another example, because this happened in my career. I had somebody that was servicing 2 factories from a central location. And so I'll just pick distances. They're located in point A. Point B, one of their factories, is 50 miles. Point C, the other factory, is 70 miles, both from their home base. They would go to the 50-mile place, but they'd count the 70-mile place as their home factory, and if there's 100 miles between their home factory and the other one, they'd drive the 50 miles, and they'd put in 170. So, well, no, that doesn't work that way. In their mind, I'm sure the person was an honorable person and wasn't deliberately trying to game the system. I'll be kind, so they weren't deliberately trying to game the system. But one is that's not the appropriate way to do it. And 2 is that is in effect subsidizing as an expense a commute. And that's against the law. The IRS does not allow that as a business expense. So to your point, there are some legal ramifications there. So to bring it closer to home, if I work in this building and I live in Manchester, and I come to work every day in Manchester to Sanborn, and there is a conference in Epping. So I drive to Epping, then I drive home from Epping. That is not a reimbursable expense. I had to drive by Epping to come to Kingston anyways. So that is not a reimbursable expense. So, I mean, there's just those types of things a policy can spell out. So I did pull, and I was able to get that policy, and I forwarded our policy to Matt to just give him an example of a much more concrete and buttoned-down policy than what we have. What we have says, if you spend money for work on behalf of work, we reimburse it.
That's all it says.
And that,
So I did include.
that's one of those,
policy
yeah, but.
Right here, and it's about 3 sentences long. GCBF travel expense. And it just says you'll be reimbursed. It doesn't say you have to report any receipts or anything. It's very vague. And also, the New Hampshire School Board Association has no such policy on file. So apparently, if there's some legal issue that's decided, sometimes the laws are overturned, it's obsolete. So they don't have a sample policy.
That's interesting.
And the only other references I took, as I showed you, are in our CBAs, where they mentioned you'll be reimbursed for conferences. But it doesn't say you need to provide receipts, report expenses or anything, it just says you'll be reimbursed.
Okay, can I pause on that, on the conferences? If they wanna go on a conference, they have to go and enter it into into a piece of software that Diana manages.
Mhm.
So if I wanna go on a conference, I have to tell her what it is, I have to give her specific information about it and the costs associated with that.
Oh,
And then
okay.
she,
That goes to the manifest then? When you-
she approves it, and then I get the PO, and then that would go in the manifest.
Okay.
That, I'm thinking, there's no way we can integrate that system with our accounting system
Okay.
yet, okay? On our next system, yes, we could get some sort of seamless,
So there are administrative procedures, but they're just not in the board manual, that's all, that's fine.
right.
I did find a new policy from the School Board Association. We don't have GCCAE. I spent the day looking through the policy manual.
Oh, beautiful.
Professional staff visitations and conferences. It's category O, optional. Teachers attending out-of-state conventions or conferences shall, upon their return, file brief written summaries of such conventions or conferences with the superintendent's office. So, in other words, they have to say, I went to this, I learned this,
So,
I attend workshops or whatever. It's just more paperwork headache is what it is for the superintendent's office, but there is a policy we could adopt.
so part of the, professional development software that we have, when someone does go to a workshop or a conference, they have to fill out an evaluation form, or not a form, but an evaluation section that's part of this professional development, process. So they don't report directly.
But they're doing it.
But they cannot be reimbursed or get professional development hours until that's completed.
Okay.
It will not let them complete the final submission until that's done. So that we do that to a small
Right.
extent.
We don't need to look at any more policies right now, but I just wanted to mention it.
Just think that there's, some- and we don't need as an extensive one as work, but there's some basic financial control disciplines that we ought to incorporate in our travel policies, so that employees, administration, and financial controls are stronger than they are today. And everybody knows the rules, so that it's fair, and everybody knows what they're gonna get reimbursed for, what's covered, and what's not. And we, meals are the same thing. Because you're trying to avoid paperwork, we say, we pick a number, I think it's $10. If you're traveling out of town, you can have a meal for less than $10 without a receipt. So, I go to New York City for a meeting. Well, I can have dinner in New York City for less than $10 without a receipt, not to worry, Jay. But, if you happen to spend more than that in New York City, you best have a receipt.
Right.
That's right.
Or you're
Right.
capped at $10.
I don't know if I'd wanna go so far as saying that we'll give you money without a receipt. I don't,
But I'm just saying, there's different, so most of the people that are traveling for us are traveling to major cities where customers are located.
yes,
That it's not, most of our expenses aren't mileage expenses. I think a lot of what I've seen here is mileage expenses.
yes.
I wouldn't go there either, I'd say a receipt.
Right now, they provide, when they go to conferences, they provide like every little itty bitty receipt. And if they don't have one, they write up a little narrative that somehow they lost it,
Yeah.
okay?
And that happens, we've all been there and lost our receipt.
I wanna maintain that culture,
I would agree with that.
okay?
But and we can work, and we can schedule a separate meeting and go through this and mark it up, and, I can take my
Yeah.
first crack, you can take your first crack,
Well,
we can bring them together and come up with something that's more workable.
I'm starting to take my first crack at it,
Okay.
okay? And I'm trying to use yours as a boilerplate or a template, okay? I do wanna kind of gentrify the language, although I like the business language that you have in there. It's very straightforward. I think that it's not, the edges aren't smooth on it for teachers. Okay?
Yeah, they don't care about how we feel.
And really, aren't for conferences, like, so our teachers are, given $300 a year for a workshop. And they're only reimbursed for the cost of the workshop.
Yeah.
Right, the registration. They do not get reimbursed for travel or meals or any of that. So for the smaller conferences and workshops, I don't see a lot of travel or meals for that. That's something that I think you see more of that, Matt, than I see.
Let me be clear, I don't know that we have any untoward activity or anything that shouldn't happen happening. I just know from a financial records perspective, we're not adequate.
Well, I think, Matt, you and I talked about travel and the start and the end.
And that's required, we have to put start point and end
Well,
points.
and where their normal start is,
Yep.
and trying to figure out.
So like the scenario I used as an example.
Exactly. Yeah, we had a conversation about that, so.
I mean,
Well, I like the
ultimately,
legalese myself. I mean, it's very clear what's expected. I don't know if we need fitness clubs, but.
Yeah.
That's what I'm saying. It's just-
I mean,
didn't-
where are
I
the
didn't
pet
edit it,
sitters,
I
I'm
just said
wondering,
this is what
right?
it is.
Yeah.
You cannot expense pet sitting, but, I do like what's not reimbursable, such as movies and things in the room, that kind of thing, so I think it's pretty clear.
Yep.
Generally, I mean, we just have to look through, and anything that involves a dollar number is gonna change over time, so that's the headache, we're gonna have to
Yep.
modify it as inflation sets in, but I like what you've got so far.
Ultimately, the goal is, to what our current policy says, that is the true goal. If you had to expend personal money on district business, you ought to get reimbursed for that.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that's what the goal is for everybody.
Yeah.
So the goal is not in question, it's the best way of managing it.
I think I'd wanna stay away from having a dollar limit for a particular item, like saying, no more than $25 for dinner, because $25 will go a long way here, it won't go that far in New York City.
Correct.
Right.
So I'd rather have language in there, best
So
use
there's
of
reasonable,
funds.
yeah.
Well, then, the reason the company put the caps on was to say, okay, you people don't wanna do all the paperwork, then we're putting it at a level that you can go with that and not do it, but you can't feed yourself on that.
Yeah,
So-
that's right, yeah.
So if you wanna starve yourself to pick up $9, have at it, we're saving money. I mean, that's ultimately why they did
Basically
it
the
that way.
trade-off there.
They wouldn't say that, but I mean, that's ultimately why
Right.
they did it that way.
So it looks great to me, just have to change the.
Yeah, it
the
needs to be
organization
tailored,
standard,
but
right.
it gives a good idea of.
And it applies
of a
to other
professional
employees
travel
and not
policy.
just teachers. It would be applied
Well,
to
okay.
administrators and, is that correct?
We gotta be careful, because it has to work well with the CBA for all unions,
Right.
and then it would apply for just straight up,
What's the
like,
CBA?
I'm sorry, the collective bargaining
Okay,
agreement.
employee bargaining, what's the C?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, so it's for the unions,
Yeah.
okay?
Right.
So we gotta make sure that doesn't, if the union agreement has language that differs than the policy, then the union agreement, is,
Supersedes it.
Supersedes
So you
it.
make sure that you incorporated the union language in the agreement. 'Cause you
Right.
can't, until the next negotiation, you can't undo that
Right.
language.
and just so that you know, this is gonna be a sea change, okay? So when we do this, we need to give time for education
Yeah.
and implementation. Okay?
So I did cut and paste the sections of the two collective bargaining agreements that discuss compensation for workshops and conferences. And it just says that we'll reimburse for the cost of, it doesn't say what the costs are or the expenses that are covered. But I think the employees should be happy that we're being specific about what's covered, because then the money's used efficiently and not wasted. I don't wanna see money thrown away by one person, which takes it away from others, so I would think they would.
Ultimately,
appreciate it.
I think most statements are true. One is, I think it would be, I mentioned culture before, people would call this a culture change. They're nickel and diming me, those money grubbing, and, pick your sets of names after that. But ultimately, if we control all of our expenditures well, we can do better for our students and our teachers if we're not wasting money on things that we ought not be wasting money on. And if everybody knows what those rules are, people can see that everybody's following them, then people can say, yeah, that makes sense to me. But you still got that first hump to go over.
And I'll tell you, from the teachers, the workshops and conferences, they're clear on the fact that they have $300, and they know if they want to go to something that's $450, that they have to pay the $150, and we'll reimburse the $300, and they don't really, I guess what I wanna say is give me a hard time about that.
Because it's within the
understand it.
expectation,
Right,
and
it's
these are
been the
good
norm,
rules.
and,
Yeah.
and they know what it is,
And
so.
teachers spend hundreds or more dollars a year on supplies for their own students. Again, don't ask me how I know that, but running to Kinko's, because it's a weekend and you need to copy something for Monday, I mean, they're doing that all the time anyway,
Right.
so they're pretty much giving a lot more than we know.
Right.
Yeah. But I'm thinking it should cover the leadership too.
We don't, I mean, our entire
Anytime a
organization
leader,
has to follow this.
the principal or something goes to a conference in New York or wherever they might go,
So our audit
that's also
committee,
relevant, so.
our audit committee doesn't report to the CEO, they report to the board. And the CEO's expense books are included in the audit committee's review.
Mhm.
As a matter of fact, they have a higher weighting in the audit committee's checking
Oh, I
than
see.
others do because they spend more money.
Right.
And then they wanna make
Right.
sure that, so it's one thing to have a $25 bar bill, $2,500 bar bill. If you had 100 employees and customers together. It's another thing if it was you and Jack. Yeah. You know,
Yeah.
and they check that. We want the names of the people that were with you if you're gonna turn in that type of
Right.
an expense.
I'm pretty sure that the union people will not like the tips limited to 15 to 20%. When I was at my campus, the head of the union always wanted it to be 25% of the bill would be tipped at restaurants, and we're all like, all right. We'd go to lunch together, and then we split it up evenly, and she'd add 25% to the top. And, I didn't have tenure yet, so I'm like, okay, thanks. But, okay,
She
little
probably,
union joke there, but I mean, they're a little more generous with tipping.
it could be
They may
that
wanna
that person
change that.
once was a table
Right.
Right,
waitress.
I think
exactly.
we've all done that, yeah.
We that have had that profession,
Uh-huh.
tend to tip better.
Yes, you're right.
So, good job, this is great, thanks for,
And hopefully if I get that other one, and she said she'd get it from me because I caught her in the hallway the other day, and I said, well, I'm still working with basically one of your subordinates, I'm sure they'll get it for me. And since they did, and I said, but they said, it'd be helpful if you told one of your people to send this to me.
right,
So I expect we'll have that to bounce off on.
okay,
Exit.
all right, nice. So, anything else on that for now? It looks like we're making progress. Any public comment? I guess not. Our next meeting is October 9th at 5 PM.
In this room,
I suppose we're
affectionately known as the
continuing to
sauna.
That's,
be. All right.
Mhm.
Yeah.
I assume as we get further in year, it won't be known as the sauna, it'll be known as the icebox, but.
All right,
So I sent also a copy of the non-support policy. So maybe we wanna talk about that at the.
Yeah, I
next-
saw that come in, what,
Yeah,
is that the job manual or is that something else?
that's an actual policy.
Oh,
And
okay.
it's a policy for the non-support groups, for instance, the custodians,
Right,
myself,
non-union, right, yeah.
the tech people. So Tom had, he wanted some changes, and we don't have to go through it now. So his big, thought was vacation time. For instance, we just employed our new network, manager, and, he had 4 weeks he was used to a 4-week vacation. And so in order to get him, Tom gave him 2 weeks, up front, which is not the norm.
Right.
So his big change, that he wanted you to look at is vacation, and then the health and dental breakdown for the next few years. And again, we can look at it now or just save it until next time, but I just wanted you to be aware of what
I
this was.
haven't even looked at it yet.
Right.
Is this in our
I-
emails
yeah,
or in our
it is.
Google Docs? I
No,
didn't
it's
see it,
just
I'm
in the
sorry.
emails.
That's okay, no, I just
I
sent
never
it right.
checked Google Docs.
And you know
saw
what,
the
I
emails.
sent it about 2 hours before the meeting, so I
Okay.
didn't really expect you to.
I saw it, but I wasn't sure what the details were. I can just tell you from my personal experience, if you're in the marketplace trying to get somebody, and you say to them, particularly if it's somebody that's an experienced hand,
Right,
and I will give you 1 week vacation.
Right.
It's the same thing as saying to them, there's the door, thank you
Right.
for stopping by.
exactly,
So in my mind, there's gotta be some leeway as you're trying to
Right.
get
That's for
talent.
part-time, oh, there it is, okay.
You'll actually get
right,
people that are trying for a change of careers that, for lack of a better phrase, want a kinder and gentler life than what they've been experienced, for whatever reasons where they are today. But they wanna maintain their
right,
vacation, so they're willing to give up
Right.
salary, but they must maintain vacation because in their life work balance, they've decided they need that still.
and they've worked.
You need to be able to accommodate
Right,
that.
and they've worked for 20 years.
Correct.
It's not like they've worked for 1 year, these are people who've worked and put in their time. So just something for you to look
Yeah,
at.
I can go through that.
We can look at it at the next
Okay,
meeting.
I'm gonna add
Fortunately, I
that
have
to
2
the
days coming up
agenda.
this weekend that I can see, just good.
So let's add that to the next agenda,
Okay,
and
and other than that, there really aren't a lot of changes.
then we'll forward it to the policy subcommittee and then to the
Mhm.
board, so, okay,
Right.
great. So is Tom gonna be at our next meeting, do you think, so he can discuss this with us?
I don't know that he is.
Yeah, I don't know.
What?
I'll put that down on the
I'm gonna
list.
have to do that evaluation tonight. Start with questions, I don't know.
And just so you know, the health insurance, if you look at it, this year and next year are the same. And the reason that he wanted it to be the same is because our custodians are part of this unit, and they make $14 an
I
hour.
know.
So he wanted to give them a little time, before he raised that on them.
Right. Okay, so we'll look at that at the next meeting.
Great.
Hopefully, we'll have the exit interview questions finalized for the next meeting,
Mhm.
and the travel reimbursement policy, I'll go through it again, but other than the fitness clubs, which seemed a little over the top, everything else looks pretty good to me. I mean, I really
I'm
don't know
gonna
what
cut
to
through it.
add. Okay, then.
I'm working on it right now.
Okay, great.
But it's a lot of material to go through.
Right.
And I gotta smooth it out. So it's gonna take me some time. I'm hoping to have a draft for you,
Yeah,
but I also wanna kind of throw that out to the administrators and get their response before I send it up here.
sure.
Because I don't wanna send something to you that would ultimately blow up.
Be
as
shot
you
down
want.
by people who then find issues that need addressing, sure. No, that's great. And are we gonna start work on the job description manual
Oh.
this fall, or,
So,
I heard that's in, like, what is it, hieroglyphics or something? It's like
So-
on stone tablets,
they're old.
yeah.
I'm looking at them, the last update, 2013, 2009, 2007.
Right,
So Matt and I had actually talked, and I think we want to start with our safety officer and the administrators.
Okay.
Start there. So what I can do is for the next meeting,
okay.
I can go ahead and I can send you the job
Yeah, send me.
descriptions. But in the meantime, I want to go over those job descriptions with each person they pertain to, have them look at their job
Okay, sure.
descriptions, add, take out, and then we'll go from there.
Okay, great.
Most of them will say, I do a lot more than that, okay? Put it in.
Exactly, right. And I do think some of those have changed. Those job descriptions
Undoubtedly.
have changed,
I don't know
so.
any job that is the same 10 years later.
Right,
Reserving the mimeograph machine.
I know, like
Sign
this,
in.
like this.
I remember using that. Okay, so we'll start the job descriptions, and job. So we'll just kind of do a few at a time.